It is October 1934, and a tipple foreman in Logan County, West Virginia, watches a 9-year-old girl walk a half-mile of dirt road, carrying a tin pail wrapped in newspaper. Inside the pail is her father's lunch: 2 slabs of cornbread pressed around a smear of bacon grease, a spoonful of sorghum, and a single sliced onion. The newspaper is yesterday's Charleston Gazette. The grease is still warm. By the time she reaches the mouth of the mine, the bread has absorbed everything around it, and her father will eat it standing up in 15 minutes, with coal dust on his hands. That sandwich in 2026 is being served on a slate board in a restaurant in Asheville for $19. They call it a sorghum-glazed heritage pork ember loaf with cultured allium. The chef has a tattoo of a pig and a podcast. He did not invent any of it. What follows are 20 sandwiches that fed Appalachian families through the company's store years. The timber camps, the tenant farm decades, and the long collapse that came after the coal seams thinned. Number 14 was specifically targeted by USDA home extension agents in the 1940s as evidence of nutritional ignorance, and the agents were wrong about every single nutrient they claimed it lacked. Number 8 was the food a Pulitzer-winning photographer in 1936 used as visual shorthand for hunger, when in fact the family eating it had calculated, almost to the calorie, exactly what their bodies needed for a 14-hour shift. And number 1 is not really a sandwich at all. It is what was left when there was nothing else, and it is the reason any of these recipes survived to be remembered. The food was not lost because the mountains forgot it. It was lost because the rest of the country decided the people who made it were a punchline. Food number 20, the lard and apple butter stack. In a coal patch outside Welch, West Virginia, in 1928, breakfast is 2 pieces of biscuit dough rolled out and cooked on the lid of a wood stove. While the bread is still hot, the cook spreads one side with rendered hog lard, pure white, almost sweet, snapping with crystals, and the other with apple butter cooked down in a copper kettle the previous October, until it was the color of old leather. The 2 halves come together. The lard melts into the butter. A child eats it, walking out the door. This is not a treat. This is fuel. Roughly 600 calories, slow-burning fat, and concentrated fruit sugar in a package small enough to fit in a coat pocket. What the company stores in the mountains stocked, and what they did not, dictated everything. Lard rendered at home was free. Apple butter was the product of a community kettle day where 8 or 10 families pooled their windfall apples and stirred for 14 hours straight. The sandwich was the residue of 2 collective acts the cash economy could not touch. Food number 19, bean bread. The Cherokee made it first, and the Scots-Irish settlers who married into the southern mountains made it for the next 200 years. Soaked dried beans, usually October beans, brown speckled, with a flavor closer to chestnut than to anything in a modern grocery store, get folded into a stiff cornmeal dough and wrapped in fresh hickory or corn shucks, then dropped into a pot of simmering water. 2 hours later, the shucks are peeled away from a dense, hot loaf, and the loaf is sliced thick and pressed between 2 slabs of skillet cornbread. The technique is older than the United States. The hickory leaf imparts a faintly smoky tannin. The bean and corn pairing produces a complete amino acid profile, every essential protein the human body cannot manufacture, without a gram of meat. Indigenous nutritionists understood this through observation. Western science would not formalize it until Francis Moore Lapé's work in 1971. Food number 18, the fried bologna and mustard. By 1952, the company stores had become Kroger and IGA, and the cheapest meat in the cold case was bologna sold in a thick, red-skinned chub for 49 cents a pound. A miner's wife slices it a 1/4 inch thick, scores the edges so it does not curl, and lays it in a black skillet rubbed with bacon grease. The bologna blisters, browns, and crisps at the edges. A line of yellow mustard goes on a slice of soft white bread. The bologna comes off the heat, and the bread closes around it while the meat is still spitting. The technique that matters is the score. Without it, the slice domes up like a satellite dish and cooks unevenly. 4 small cuts at the edges keep the meat flat and force the rendered fat to baste the surface. The Maillard reaction, browning at high heat, creates roughly 600 volatile aromatic compounds, which is the entire reason a fried bologna sandwich tastes nothing like the same meat eaten cold. Food number 17. The tomato sandwich, August only. From the second week of August through the first week of September, in a tar paper house in Buchanan County, Virginia, in 1941, lunch becomes one thing and one thing only. 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick coating of homemade mayonnaise made the previous morning with 1 egg yolk, vinegar, and a slow drizzle of lard rendered cold. A single slice, never 2, of a Brandywine or German Johnson tomato, grown 6 steps from the back door, still warm from the vine, salted heavily. The bread immediately starts to dissolve. You eat it standing over the sink. The seasonality was not aesthetic. It was the only window in the calendar when the tomato could exist. Mountain soils are acidic and stony, and the sugar content of a fully ripe heirloom tomato grown in that soil at peak August humidity reaches concentrations no commercial tomato has matched. Since selective breeding for shipping durability began in the 1960s. The flavor people remember was real. It is genuinely no longer available in supermarkets. What is happening in these first 4 sandwiches is not nostalgia. It is a documented pattern. Between 1935 and 1975, the Federal Extension Service, the public school system, and the food processing industry conducted what amounted to a coordinated rebranding of mountain food as ignorance. Home economics teachers in West Virginia were trained at land-grant universities to demonstrate that hill cooking was nutritionally deficient, hygienically suspect, and culturally embarrassing. The textbooks, several of which are still archived at the University of Kentucky, used phrases like corrective dietary intervention. The food the women were making had, by every measure modern nutritional science now uses, better fat profiles, better fiber content, better micronutrient density, and better seasonal alignment with the body's actual needs than the canned soup casseroles the agents were teaching them to make instead. The lesson was never about food. It was about who got to be considered modern. Food number 16. The pickled egg and onion. On the back bar of a beer joint in Mingo County, West Virginia, in 1956, sits a gallon jar of cloudy pink brine with 24 eggs suspended in it. The brine is the leftover liquid from a jar of pickled beets, recharged with vinegar and salt and a handful of pickling spices. A miner walks in after his shift, orders a Fall City beer, and the bartender slides him a cracked plate with a pickled egg cut in half, a slice of raw sweet onion, and 2 saltines. He puts the egg on the saltine, the onion on the egg, and eats it in 3 bites with a swallow of beer between each. This was bar food, but it was also dinner. A pickled egg delivers 6 grams of protein. The vinegar provides acetic acid that aids in iron absorption from the day's beans. And the raw allium in the onion functions as a natural antimicrobial, significant in a county where running water did not reach most hollers until 1962. The bar gave it away free with a beer, because the bar got the eggs free from local farms paying off tabs. Food number 15. The Sawmill gravy biscuit pocket. In a logging camp on the Cumberland Plateau in 1922, the cook splits a cathead biscuit, fist-sized, rough-edged, baked 20 at a time in a cast-iron pan, and ladles into the cavity a thick gray gravy made from flour, browned in pork sausage drippings, milk, black pepper, and a coarse chopped scrap of the sausage itself. He hands it to a man going up the skid road. The biscuit absorbs the gravy structurally, becoming dense and almost pudding-like in the center, while the crust stays sturdy enough to hold in one hand. It will stay hot for 2 hours. The genius of the dish is the roux. Browning flour in animal fat at the right temperature breaks down complex starches into more digestible forms while developing nutty Maillard compounds, an effect French cuisine charges a premium to deliver. The pepper provided pungency that masked the off notes of milk that had ridden a mule down the mountain in a tin pail. The fat content was what kept a man swinging a peavey for 10 hours. Food number 14, the grease bread. The simplest entry on this list, and the one the USDA targeted most aggressively. A slice of yesterday's cornbread, split. A spoonful of bacon grease from the white ceramic crock that sat on every kitchen stove between Roanoke and Pikeville. A pinch of salt. A grind of black pepper if there was any. Pressed together. Hand to child. Walk to school. The grease in the crock was not a single substance. It was a layered archive. The previous month of breakfasts, fortified each morning with the day's drippings, gradually accumulating fat-soluble vitamins, browning compounds, and trace minerals from every cut of meat that had hit the pan. A Cornell food chemistry study in 2007 measured comparable home-stored bacon fat and found significant levels of vitamin D, conjugated linoleic acid, and choline. The grandmothers were eating a fermented animal fat condiment that contemporary nutritionists would call functional. Food number 13, the ramps and egg. For 2 weeks in April, the hardwood hollows of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky pull from the leaf litter, the green flag of allium trichocum. The ramp, a wild leek with a flavor between garlic, onion, and something faintly sulfuric and wet. A coal miner's wife in Pocahontas County in 1938 fries a handful of chopped ramps in bacon grease, cracks 2 eggs into the pan, scrambles loose, and folds the whole mass into a piece of light bread rolled around it. The smell stays on a man for 3 days. Mining bosses in some camps banned ramp consumption among the workforce because the odor permeated everything within 20 feet. The ramp is nutritionally an extraordinary plant, high in vitamins A and C, rich in selenium, and one of the few wild greens to provide meaningful quantities of allicin, the same anti-inflammatory sulfur compound that gives garlic its medicinal reputation. After a winter of beans, lard, and stored apples, a 2-week ramp binge in April was the body's annual reset. Food number 12, the fried green tomato and mayonnaise. Late September, before the first frost, every garden in the southern mountains held a final crop of green tomatoes that would never ripen. A farm wife in Tazewell County, Virginia in 1944 slices them a 1/2 inch thick, dredges them in cornmeal cut with a teaspoon of flour, and lays them into a skillet of bacon grease so hot the cornmeal crackles audibly on contact. They cook 90 seconds aside. She layers 2 slices between 2 pieces of toasted bread, spread thick with homemade mayonnaise, and salts the whole thing aggressively. The acid of the unripened tomato cuts through the fat. The cornmeal crust shatters. The chemistry is a small wonder. Unripe tomatoes are higher in vitamin C than ripe ones and contain tomatine, a glycoalkaloid with documented antibacterial properties. The cornmeal coating provides a moisture-trapping crust that allows the tomato interior to soften without dissolving. The mayonnaise provides emulsified fat that carries the flavor across the palate. The sandwich is, by any culinary metric, sophisticated. Food number 11, the possum belly. By name alone, the entry seems designed to confirm every stereotype. The reality is more interesting. In Letcher County, Kentucky in 1933, a coal miner who has not eaten meat in 11 days catches a young opossum in a snare on his way home, dresses it in the yard, parboils it overnight to render the fat and remove the gamey notes, and the next day his wife shreds the meat, mixes it with cornbread crumbs, sage from the kitchen garden, and onion, and stuffs the mixture between two cornbread halves. The cornbread is buttered with the rendered possum fat, which is sweeter and milder than pork lard. A possum is, biochemically, a strange animal, lean, with an unusually high content of taurine and selenium, and remarkably low in the parasitic load of other small game because of the species' unique immune chemistry. The parboil then shred technique extracts maximum protein while breaking down the connective tissue that gives small game its rubbery quality. The cornbread carrier provides the carbohydrate matrix the body needs to actually absorb the protein. There is a useful distinction here between food eaten by the poor and food eaten by the bottom rung of a hierarchy. Many cultures eat humble food without shame. The French peasant ate cassoulet. The Italian peasant ate ribollita. Both dishes are now national treasures, with chefs writing PhD theses about them. What happened to Appalachian cooking is something more specific. The food was not just rural and not just poor. It was the food of a population the rest of the country had decided was racially and culturally suspect. The Scots-Irish Hill descendants, the African-American holler communities, and the mixed Melungeon families of the inner Cumberlands were grouped together by 20th century journalists into a single category called Hillbilly. And the food got categorized with the people. France protected its peasant food because it considered the peasants French. America did not extend that courtesy to its own. Food number 10, the Souse meat and white bread. Hog killing day in Wise County, Virginia in 1947 ends with a pot of head cheese, souse meat, simmering on the back of a coal stove. The cook has boiled the entire head of the hog with vinegar, hot peppers, and pickling spice, picked the meat from the bone, packed it into a bread loaf pan, and weighted it overnight with a stone wrapped in cloth. By morning, it has set into a tight, gelatin-bound terrine. Sliced thin and pressed between two pieces of soft white bread with a smear of yellow mustard, it is the working man's lunch from December through February. The dish is structurally identical to French fromage de tête, served in Lyon for €60. The Appalachian version uses more vinegar and more pepper, which serves both as preservative and as a digestive aid for a fat-rich product. Collagen from the hog's connective tissue dissolves into gelatin during the long simmer and binds the terrine without commercial gelatin. The technique is one of the most resource-efficient in the global meat tradition. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ground, and the finished product keeps for weeks in a cold pantry. Food number 9, the cornbread and buttermilk crumble. Not technically a sandwich, but it lived in the sandwich slot at the kitchen table in McDowell County, West Virginia in 1939. A piece of leftover cornbread crumbled into the bottom of a heavy ceramic glass. Cold buttermilk poured over it until the cornbread floats. A spoon, a pinch of salt. Eaten standing in the doorway watching for the school bus or sitting on the porch in late afternoon. Children ate it. Old men ate it. Pregnant women ate it because nothing else stayed down. What is happening in the glass is fermentation chemistry, real cultured buttermilk, the kind separated from the churn, not the cultured skim milk product on grocery shelves since 1985, is a probiotic broth carrying lactobacillus strains that the human gut requires for B vitamin synthesis. The cornbread soaks up the bacteria and the lactic acid, and what arrives in the stomach is, in effect, a homemade probiotic delivery system, the grandmother making it for her morning sick granddaughter. was conducting unschooled microbiology. Food, number 8. The onion sandwich. Walker Evans's 1936 photograph of a tenant family in eastern Kentucky shows a child eating something between 2 slices of white bread. The caption identifies it as evidence of malnutrition. The sandwich, in fact, is 2 slices of soft bread, a 1/4-inch slab of raw sweet onion, a heavy salting, and, invisibly because she had wiped the knife, a thin scrape of bacon grease on the bread. The child's mother had calculated the calories of every meal in the household to within 50 per person. She knew exactly what she was doing. Raw allium delivers quercetin, a flavonoid with documented anti-inflammatory and antihistamine properties. The bacon grease undercoat, too thin for Evans's camera to register, supplied the fat needed to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins from the onion. The salt replaced the electrolytes lost to a humid eastern Kentucky summer in a house with no fan. The white bread, made at the cooperative bakery in Hazard from federally distributed flour, supplied roughly 200 calories of fast carbohydrate. The sandwich was a calculated piece of nutritional engineering by a woman with a 4th-grade education. Food, number 7. The salt-cured country ham biscuit. A Smithfield-cured ham hangs in a smokehouse outside Galax, Virginia for 14 months. By the time it is cut down in 1955, it has lost 1/3 of its weight to evaporation and developed a rind of mold that the cook scrapes off with a paring knife. She slices the ham paper thin against the grain. Anything thicker would be inedibly salty, and presses it into a hot biscuit split with her thumb. No mustard, no butter. The biscuit's residual fat and the ham's concentrated salt and funk are the only seasonings the dish requires or can support. The ham is functionally identical to Spanish jamon serrano or Italian prosciutto di Parma, a long-aged, dry-cured pork product that develops umami compounds through controlled enzymatic breakdown over months in cool air. The Appalachian version, descended from English country curing traditions brought through Virginia and into the southern hills, predates the Italian protected designation system by roughly a century in the New World. The biscuit is the structural counterpart of the ham. High fat, slightly sweet, neutral, designed to absorb and frame intensity. Food. Number 6. The squirrel brain sandwich. The entry the modern reader does not want to read about. In a tar paper house outside Hazard, Kentucky in 1948, a hunter brings home 4 squirrels. His wife dresses them, splits the small skulls with the back of a butter knife, and removes the brains intact. She seasons them with salt and pepper, dredges in flour, fries quickly in butter, and lays the 4 sets, about the size of a $50 each, across 2 pieces of toasted light bread with a streak of red-eye gravy. It is a delicacy in the household. The hunter eats it first. Brain tissue is, on a per-gram basis, one of the densest sources of phosphatidylcholine, omega-3 fatty acid DHA, and selenium known to human nutrition. Indigenous and rural cultures globally have prized organ meats for these properties, without needing the biochemistry to know why. The dish is a small luxury earned through a successful hunt. 4 squirrels for an entire household meal. 3 forces, working in rough sequence across the 20th century, did most of the killing. The first was institutional. Federal extension agents, public health officials, and food regulators who treated mountain practices as problems to be corrected rather than systems to be understood. The second was economic. The collapse of the small farm, the small smokehouse, the small dairy, and the small slaughterhouse under consolidation pressure from agricultural processors. The third was cultural. The steady 40-year transformation of the Appalachian person into a national joke, which made it impossible for the descendants of mountain cooks to claim their food as serious cuisine without appearing to claim something embarrassing. The food did not lose a fair fight. It was assigned a category, and the category was assigned a fate. What is happening now in restaurants from Asheville to Brooklyn is not revival. It is laundering. Food number 5. The wilted lettuce and hot bacon grease on toast. First week of May in Russell County, Virginia, in 1956. The leaf lettuce in the kitchen garden is finally ankle high. A grandmother washes a colander of leaves, slices spring onions over them, and pours over the top 3 tablespoons of bacon grease with a splash of cider vinegar, both hot from the skillet. The lettuce wilts on contact, releasing its water and absorbing the fat. She lifts the slick green tangle onto a slice of toast, salts it, folds the toast over, and hands it to her husband on his way to the field. The technique is a one-pan vinaigrette, emulsified fat and acid applied at temperature to a delicate green, which serves both to soften it and to break down its waxy cuticle so the body can access the carotenoids and vitamin K underneath. The same technique appears in German speck and spinat dishes and in French frisée au lardon, where it is considered classical. In an Appalachian kitchen, it was Tuesday. Food number 4. The Chow-chow on saltines. Late October in Buchanan County, Virginia, in 1942. The garden has produced a final mixed harvest. Green tomatoes that will not ripen, the last cabbage, sweet peppers, hot peppers, onions, and a bushel of green beans that bolted. A grandmother chops everything coarse, layers it with pickling salt overnight, drains it, and packs it into quart jars with a cider vinegar brine, spiced with mustard seed, celery seed, and turmeric. By Christmas, the jars have mellowed into chow-chow, sour, sweet, fiercely vegetal, and the color of a forest floor. A spoonful on a saltine cracker is by itself lunch on a cold afternoon when the mine is on strike and there is nothing else. The lacto-pickle effect, even with a vinegar brine, develops complex flavor compounds over months in a cool pantry. The vegetable mixture is a near-complete vitamin profile in a single jar. Vitamin C from the peppers, vitamin K from the cabbage, capsaicin from the hot peppers as a circulatory stimulant in cold weather, and acetic acid from the brine as a digestive aid. The saltine cracker, refined flour, lard, and salt provided the carbohydrate platform. Food number 3. The liver mush sandwich. Western North Carolina, particularly Marion and Shelby, made it famous, and a country store outside Asheville in 1953 had it on the menu under 3 names: liver mush, liver pudding, and poor man's pâté. Pork liver and pork head meat are simmered together with cornmeal, sage, black pepper, and salt until the mixture forms a stiff porridge, which is packed into loaf pans and chilled, sliced a ½ inch thick, fried in a hot skillet until the cornmeal crust crackles, and laid between 2 pieces of soft white bread with mustard and a fried egg. It is the breakfast a textile mill worker carries to the morning shift. Pork liver delivers more vitamin A per ounce than any commonly eaten food on the American continent, roughly 300% of the daily requirement in a single small slice. The cornmeal binder serves as both a carbohydrate base and a flavor neutralizer, dampening the iron mineral note of the liver and allowing it to function as breakfast food rather than a special occasion dish. The technique is essentially identical to French boudin noir without the blood, and to Mexican queso de puerco with a different binder. Food number 2. The soup beans and cornbread sandwich. Not what most viewers will picture. In a kitchen in Harlan County, Kentucky in 1934, a coal miner's wife pulls a pot of pinto beans off the back of the stove. The beans have been cooking for 6 hours with a smoked ham hock, a bay leaf, and an onion, and the broth has thickened to a velvety, mahogany-colored gravy, the local term for which is pot liquor. She splits a square of skillet cornbread, ladles a half cup of beans and broth into the cavity, presses the top of the cornbread back down, and hands it to her husband wrapped in a clean cloth. The cornbread absorbs the broth structurally. The whole thing is eaten in two hands at the bottom of a shaft. The amino acid pairing of corn and beans is, again, the foundational protein chemistry of the indigenous Americas, a complete protein from two cheap plants. The pot liquor broth contains the dissolved minerals from the ham hock's bone and connective tissue, calcium, magnesium, glutamate, and a measurable quantity of glycine, which the body uses for connective tissue repair. After 10 hours bent under a low coal seam, a man's body needed exactly that amino acid. The food and the labor matched. Food number 1, the biscuit and nothing. It is February 1933 in a holler outside War, West Virginia. A woman named Cora Justice. This is a real person, recorded in a WPA oral history archived at West Virginia University. Has a 4-year-old daughter and a husband who has not had paid work in 7 months. The flour barrel has roughly 2 cups left. The lard tin is empty. There is no meat, no eggs, no milk, no apple butter, no sorghum, no bacon grease in the crock. There is salt. There is water from the well. There is the cold ash bed of the cook stove. She mixes the flour with water and a pinch of salt, kneads it 20 seconds, pinches off 6 small pieces, and bakes them on the cook stove lid using yesterday's banked coals. They come out hard, pale, and almost weightless. She splits one with her thumb, looks at the empty crock, looks at her daughter, and hands her the biscuit closed on nothing. "Pretend it's apple butter," she says. The daughter does. This is the sandwich at the bottom of every other sandwich on this list. Every grease bread, every pickled egg, every fried bologna sandwich exists because the women in these mountains were trying, across generations, across collapses, across strikes and floods and explosions, to never have to hand a child a closed biscuit and tell her to pretend. The whole inventive, sophisticated, calorically engineered, nutritionally calibrated tradition was a structure built in the dark to keep that one moment from happening. When it failed quietly. In kitchens no one was watching. And the children who were handed the empty biscuits grew up and mostly did not talk about it. Cora Justice's daughter, Verlie, lived until 2009. She made apple butter every October of her adult life. She kept a crock of bacon grease on her stove. She fed her grandchildren cornbread and buttermilk and tomato sandwiches in August, and pickled eggs at Christmas. She was asked once, in an interview at age 78, why she cooked so much when her husband was dead and her children were grown. She said, "I learned to cook from a woman who once gave me a biscuit with nothing in it. I have not stopped trying to fill that biscuit since." If you have a grandmother, an aunt, a great-aunt, a neighbor, in her 80s who came up out of these mountains or out of any version of these mountains in any part of this country, call her this week. Ask her what she ate when there was nothing. Ask her what her mother gave her. Write it down before it is gone, because the people repackaging it on slate boards in renovated warehouses will not write it down for you. And what they are selling is not the food. The food was the love. The food was the fight. The food was the refusal to let a child go to sleep believing the kitchen was empty. Tell me in the comments which of these sandwiches your family still makes. Tell me the name of the woman who taught you. We will keep her here on this table for as long as the channel is on.